Daf Mem Tes Amud Aleph. We're doing the Gemara very nicely with it's a Gemara that's about the Beis Hamikdash. So it becomes people have a hard time sometimes relating to it because it's not practical. It's not like a halacha that we're involved with. It's trying to imagine the way the Beis Hamikdash was built and what was there and how it was and how the libations spilled, where they spilled to, and how the actual building of the Beis Hamikdash, what was under the mizbeach. So basically, the Gemara that we learned yesterday was that the Gemara brought a pasuk. Rabbi Bar Bachana, the name of Rabbi Yochanan, brought a pasuk from Shir Hashirim about Chamuke Yirei Chayech Kumei Chaloyim Maise Yedei Aman. And Rabbi Bar Bachana, the name of Rabbi Yochanan, explained the pasuk to mean that these shisin, which we've been talking about now for 2 days, the shisin, which are the hollow under the mizbeach, was reached all the way until the Tahoim, and it was created Sheishas and Bereshis, meaning that Hashem created it at the beginning of creation. And the Gemara then brought another source to such a thing, Rabbi Shmuel, Brisa from Rabbi Shmuel, that he says Bereshis, the actual word Bereshis means that Hashem created Shis. The first word of the Torah is talking about these Shisin, which gives us an understanding of how important they were for the world that Hashem created. That was like the first thing that Hashem created, Bara Shis, created the Shisin, which is the Mizbeach, which I guess is connected to the fact that it's all about a kapara, atonement. And then the Gemara brings a brisa of Rabbi Yossi. Now the brisa of Rabbi Yossi is where we did that and then we stopped. This brisa of Rabbi Yossi, so he brings a pasuk from Yeshaya. And what does he say? So Rabbi Yossi, so we have the first two opinions. The first two opinions said that the Shisin went all the way deep until the Tahoim, till the depths. Rabbi Yossi comes along, he says the same thing. The Shisin are Ada Tahoim, till the depths. And it brings the whole pasuk about how Hashem gave us this beautiful, Hashem gave us this kerem, this orchard, and which basically is, or Hashem chose the Yidden, that's his kerem, that's his vineyard, and it says that he gave us this place, Eretz Yisrael, which is Keren ben Shamein, like a corner that is very luxurious and fancy, and Shamein, literally it means fattened. It means it's a very good corner. And he even strengthened it with fortification, and even got rid of the people that lived there, the stones, we'll call them. He removed all the stones, which is symbolic of removing all of the other nations that could cause us to sin. And he planted there a shoot, a branch, a good vine, and he even put a migdal, a tower there. And the migdal that it refers to is the mizbeach. And then it says, and he even hewed out a yekev, a wine vat, which refers to the shisin. And that's the main point here, that he built the Beis HaMikdash there, or built the mizbeach there, And well, he did build a Beis Hamikdash. That's the Soyrek, the shoot, and he built there a Migdal, which is the Mizbeach, a Migdal, a tower. And the reason the Migdal, the base of the Mizbeach, the altar, is called a tower is because it gets narrower and narrower as it gets up, similar to a tower. And the fact that he built in there, he built he carved out a wine vat that refers to these shisen that we're talking about, these hollow area for the wine to go to. Now, what is Rabbi Yossi trying to say? So he says that there's a hollow that goes all the way to the Tehom, to the depths. So the previous two opinions basically made it clear that there was a hollow that went all the way to the depths, and it was made by Hashem. What is Rabbi Yossi adding to that or changing from that? So Rabbi Yossi is saying that they also go, that these shisen, this hollow also goes ad Tehom. I mean, he says that clearly. So he, in a certain sense, he's agreeing with the previous two statements that it's ad Tehom. It's all the way deep until the Tehom. But what he is arguing about, this is developed by Tosfos. Tosfos develops this thought. He says he's arguing that it wasn't made by Hashem. It wasn't made from Sheshis Yimei Bereshis. It wasn't. It goes until the Tehom, but it was not created when Hashem created the world. It's just like the Beis Hamikdash. Did Hashem build the Beis Hamikdash? No, the people did. Did Hashem build the Mizbeach? No, the people did. So the Shisen were also built the same way by the people. So this is the meaning of the pasuk that he built a Beis Hamikdash, he built a Mizbeach, he built a Shisen. It means a person did it. And so even though it did go to the Tehom, now how do we know that it went to the Tehom? The commentaries here bring that there's some type of a Gzeirah Shava, that it says that it refers to the Atlantic Ocean, and that it says Yekev here and Yekev there, and it basically means it goes all the way to the depths, to the water, the bottom, the depths where the source of the water is. And another understanding is the word chotzav means it went all the way to the depths, the deepest as you can go, and that refers to the term chotzav means that. So it was carved out, it was hewed out all the way to the depths. Those are the two ways that the commentaries understand the source. In other words, Rabbi Yossi doesn't really prove it; he just says it. He doesn't prove clearly. Now, the commentaries on the Gemara Yerushalmi and another commentary, they both seem to say it's somehow from the wording, you could somehow either see it or you learn, expound on it, and comes out that it's all the way to the depths. Now, the Tosfos mentions that there is some text over here that's supposed to be fit in, and Tosfos says it must be supposed to be fit in right here, and it mentions about David HaMelech digging. And so, according to Tosfos, if you add those words over here, it comes out that David HaMelech dug deep in the ground, and he reached the depths. He went 16,000 amos, quite deep. He dug very deep, and the fact that it was dug to the depths seems to be because David HaMelech went so deep. It means he went all the way to the depths. Now, the fact that Rabbi Yossi says that these shisen, it was made by, it seems like he's saying it was made by man and it went to the depths, and that fits very well with what this other wording that's added over here that Tosfos says it belongs here, is that David HaMelech was the one who basically dug over on in that area and went all the way down this amount of 16,000 cubits, and ultimately that's considered the depths. So that would seem to be another alternative understanding of how Rabbi Yossi knows it went to the depths, because David HaMelech did it. There's a tradition that David HaMelech dug over here. Now, I mentioned yesterday that the Gemara Makkos talks about David HaMelech's digging, and it mentions that he had a big problem because he actually dug a little too deep. He removed some a shard that had announced, if you remove me, the water will inundate the world. And sure enough, he did remove it. He didn't listen, and he removed it, and it did create a big problem, and he was nervous. And ultimately, he wrote Hashem's name and threw it on that area, and it stopped the water from coming up. And so that's the story of David HaMelech. So definitely seems like David HaMelech dug all the way to the depths. He almost caused the water to destroy the world. Now, so what comes out where we're up to is that there was these shisin under the mizbeach. There's these hollow area under the mizbeach, and it went very, very deep. And that's where the wine libation and the water libation would go to. So when they would pour the wine libation every day and the water libation on Sukkot, it would go all the way under the Mizbeach, all the way until the depths of the earth, the depth, the Tohoim, it's called. Now comes the next Gemara, and the next Gemara argues on this. And it says that it actually didn't go all the way down to the Tohoim. The next Gemara says there's a different opinion, and that it went into an area that was on top of the ground of the Mizbeach, of the top of the ground that was below the Mizbeach, meaning the ground was marble, and this did not penetrate the marble. It stayed there by the marble, and it sort of congealed. And every so often, when they needed to, and it mentions here a term every 70 years, they would gather this. So there was like a area where it would seem to flow to, and I guess it would evaporate at least some of the water part of it, and whatever was left was hardened, and it was basically removed and cleaned. And our Gemara will tell us that they actually burnt it. It had to be burned in a holy, in a holy place, and which basically means in the courtyard. So this is a different, alternative view, that it did not go all the way down to the depths. Now, I don't know the deep understanding of why our Gemara is dealing with this, and what does it make a difference if the shisin went all the way down to the depths, or if it stayed on top of the Mizbeach. But I believe that there must be some deep meaning behind it, like the fact that the shisin went all the way to the depths, and the nisuch, the libations, went all the way down to the depths. There must be something that that it shows, like that Hashem is enjoying, like it's holding up the world, maybe, or something along those lines. Again, it's just a thought that comes to my mind. What is the meaning of the fact that the shisin would go all the way down to the depths, and that these libations would go there? Maybe something to the effect of, like, this is like it says the world stands on three things. Yeah. So here it's like this is all the way down to the depths. This is like the service of Hashem. It says the world stands on three things: Torah, Avodah, and Gemilas Chasadim. So in a certain sense, I don't know, this might be a similar idea. Again, I haven't really seen anything about this, but it seems like it's in a literal sense, the world is standing on our service to Hashem. Like this is all the way down in the essence of the bottom of the foundation of the world. It's called Shisin, which actually means foundation. The world stands on these libations. It's it's giving strength to maybe to the world. I don't know. It's interesting, and the fact that we make such a big deal on the water libation and that we dance and rejoice over it. There seems to be some element of this idea that it's sort of giving strength to the entire world, which does fit with the Sukkot holiday because we're also praying for all the 70 nations of the world. And then we're judged on on the holiday of Sukkot, we're judged on the water. And so we use water maybe to strengthen the world, and that gives a certain maybe awakening to Hashem. It's called an Isarusa Dilasata. From below, we're pouring the water to awaken Hashem, to give us a good judgment about the water. Again, it's just a thought that comes to my mind. It says that on Chag, we're nidoin alamayim, and then we're pouring the water, and the water is going all the way down to the depths. That's like holding up the world, that it's giving Hashem the enjoyment, maybe, that will cause Hashem to want to give us a good judgment about water. Again, this is just a thought that comes to my mind based on these few opinions, that the Shisin would go all the way down. We have three opinions that hold the Shisin went all the way down to the depths. Maybe it has something to do with that the world stands on Avodah. We know Torah, Avodah, and Milas Chasadim, but one of the three is Avodah's service to Hashem, and that's maybe this idea. But now we'll have to explain the other opinion. The other opinion is that the water did not. The libations stayed right there at the Mizbeach. Right at the Mizbeach, that's where the libations stayed, and there was an area. Now, there's different opinions as to exactly what area did these libations. Where was this hollow area where the wine it hardened and it became some type of a it just got old and until they cleaned it out, it was stuck there in this what's called a lul. Lul means a hole. That's what the word lul. Lul is a hole. It stayed in this hole. So where was this hole? So the simple understanding here is that this lul, this hole, was part of the ramp that went up to the altar. So the ramp was pushed right up to the altar with one hairbreadth of space, but one side of the lul did not actually reach the altar because there was a part carved out at the edge of the ramp that allowed for the wine and water libations to stay there until they hardened and dissolved a little, probably evaporated, and they hardened, and ultimately they were cleaned out at some point. Now, according to this opinion, again, I'm not sure what the deep meaning behind this is. Why was this? What was so valuable to Hashem that the libations should stay here? Like, what was the goal? What did it do? Maybe the fact that it was connected to that it's on the side of the Mizbeach, it was next to the Mizbeach, the water and the wine libations. Was that somehow it somehow was similar to the other sacrifices that were on the Mizbeach? This was next to the Mizbeach. It stayed on the side of, maybe it had something similar to like the ashes that had to be placed next to the Mizbeach. So here you have the water and the wine also being placed next to the Mizbeach. I see a similarity there, that just like there was a mitzvah every day to do Trumas Hadeshin, to take out some of the ashes and put it, the Samai Eitzel Hamizbeach, was placed next to the altar. So could this also be like a concept of placing the placing the water next to the altar, similar to the ashes that was placed next to the altar? Maybe there's some connection there. Again, I'm just throwing a thought. Yes, David.
Yeah, there's two notes here,
Yeah.
the Steinsaltz. One is it's talking about the tower, even Migdal. So it says in Talmud Yerushalmi, the tower is interpreted as referring to the sanctuary, to the Mishkan, which was 100 cubits high, like a tower. And the next thing is talking about the Shisin.
One
So
second. It says it was 100 cubits high.
Yeah,
The Mishkan, the tabernacle.
that's what it says.
Doesn't sound right. I mean, the
tower is interpreted as referring to the sanctuary.
Okay, that might not be the tabernacle.
Okay, so it's the sanctuary, which was
Okay.
100 cubits high, like a tower.
Okay, fine. We'll say okay.
No, 100 cubits high.
Well, maybe it's one of the walls of the Beis Hamikdash, and
No, he's talking about the Mishkan.
No, I don't think he's talking about the Mishkan.
Yeah,
Can't
it
be.
says the sanctuary.
Sanctuary. Sanctuary
It says
doesn't
the
necessarily
sanctuary.
mean the Mishkan. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Sorry. And then the next note is talking about the shisin, which it translates it as the drain pipes.
Right.
So he says a tradition is cited in responsive literature of the Gonim that the drain pipes were a pit 1 cubit wide and 600 cubits deep. According to the 600 cubits deep. The Miri explains that according to that tradition, the Kohanim clearly could not descend to the bottom to clean the drain pipes. Rather, it means that they descended as far as they could and cleaned there, or that they used special equipment to reach beyond the point where they could descend no further.
Snake. They snaked it out like a plumber. But that's also only if it got clogged. I can't imagine how many.
Just 1 second, Isaac.
Was how many times a year?
Just 1 second before you say your thing, Isaac. What you just, I just want to, on what David just said, I just want to mention that Rashi over here says that the Nesachim went down in this area and they were surrounded. It had to stay in one place, right? That's what, because they cleaned it out. So it stayed in this area and it went down until the ground. And the ground had marble and the wine would not dissolve in it. And all the years wine of the whole year would stay there. And this opinion doesn't hold that it went all the way down to the depths. And this is what we'll say later, that this opinion argues on the rabbis. So according to the way Rashi understands it, it did not go that deep. You mentioned like 600 amos down. It doesn't sound like that from Rashi. From Rashi, it sounds that it went right to the ground and up to the top of the ramp. That's where it somehow the libations would flow from the altar right next to it. It was not too far. It would flow down the corner of the altar and it would flow down into that area that was on the ramp. In the ramp, it was able to reach all the way up to the top of the ramp. It had however much you want to say, it might have been an amma, it might have been a cubit, but it was not deep like you're mentioning. It was not more than, according to this understanding, and that's what it sounds like from Rashi, it could not have been deep more than 9 cubits, because that's the height of the ramp. So it would reach up to the top of the ramp was 9 cubits, and it was maybe 8 cubits length, 9 cubits high, maybe 1 cubit width, maybe. Doesn't say clearly, but that's what it would seem like according to Rashi. So what you're mentioning is another opinion, which I guess, was it the Meiri? Is that the name of the opinion that you're that you're quoting, and how he's going to explain this Rabbi Elazar Bar Tzadok? Is that what you were? Is that what you're saying? Again, it's just like
Yeah,
I just want to make it clear, like we're not learning that way. That, in other words, that the simple understanding here, based on Rashi, is not that understanding, and that understanding makes it very similar to the other understandings because it went all the way down to the depths. I mean, 600 cubit. Listen, I don't know the depths of the earth, but I mean, maybe that opinion holds that that's considered the depths. Is once it reaches 600 cubits, that's good enough. I don't know. In other words,
it says that this is a tradition from the Goning,
from the
600
goal,
amas deep. It says the
right?
Meiri explains that according to that tradition, the Kohanim could not descend to the bottom to clean the shisin that
Right,
they.
right. And this is going on this Gemara clearly on Rabbi Elazar Bar Tzadok, or
Yeah,
is it going on the previous thing?
it's going on the wording of Yordin Lashisin.
Lasham, right. Yeridin
Yord,
Lasham. Uh-huh.
no, the
Uh-huh.
Yordin Lashisin.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Well, we have the word Yeridin Lasham, but okay, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, anyway, that's interesting that he says that. Okay, we'll have to see how that fits. Now, this Gemara, we're going to be learning more about it also later. So it's going to come up again. So we'll see how it when it comes up again, and we might have more. Believe on 53, it's going to come up again. So we'll have to come back to that there. So anyway, thank you, David, for bringing that up. Now I'm going to read this. I'm going to learn it inside now. So we're on page 49a, and we're going to start with the word Tanya, which is 6 lines from the bottom. 49a, 6 lines from the bottom. And David, could maybe just tell us what page it is in the Koran.
It's 237.
Page 237 in the Koran, in the Steinsaltz. Okay, so 6 lines up from the bottom, page 49a. Tanya Amar Rabbi Elazar Bar Tzadok. So we learned in a brisa, it was taught in a brisa. Elazar Bar Tzadok says, Wul katan haya, there was a small hole, like a window, you could call it, Bain kevesh lamizbeach, between the kevesh, the ramp, and the altar.
It calls it a gap.
A gap. And so there was this gap between the kevesh, the ramp, and the altar. But ma'arave shal kevesh, on the western side of the kevesh. So keep in mind, the kevesh was 16 amos. It was 16 cubits, and the kevesh was pushed up close to the wall of the mizbeach, and the mizbeach was on the bottom of the mizbeach. It was 32 cubits, but as it got taller, that's why one of the reasons we call it a tower is it got smaller and smaller. It kept getting narrower. On the top of the mizbeach was only 28 amos by 28 amos. So from those 28 cubits, 16 of them were connected to this kevesh, to this ramp. Now the kevesh, so there was a gap between the kevesh and the mizbeach on the west side. That means on the east side, there was no gap, or it was a very tiny gap, I should say. It was like a hairbreadth. And on the west side, there was a bigger gap. This gap was only on the west side. So the ramp pushed all the way up, but because it was carved out on the west side, so there was a gap. The achas l'shivim shana, and the Brisa says it was once every 70 years. Pirchei kahuna yardin l'sham, the young ones of the kayanim would go down there into this what we're going to call now shisin, into this area that's this area that the libations would flow to. Umalaktin misham yayin karush, and they would gather from there the wine that was hardened. Shadoimel igule devela, that the Gemara's example of what it looked like was round cakes of figs, which is basically because it hardened after years of being together. It hardened in it, and turned into this. It was like it looked like the round cakes of figs. This once every 70 years they would come and clean it out, and then they would burn it, not outside the Beis Hamikdash, in the Beis in the Azara, in the whole in a holy place, in a kedusha, in a holy place, which basically means in the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash. And why did they need to do that? Shneimar, as it says, "B'kodesh haseich," in the holiness, it shall be poured, shall be the libation shall be poured by kodesh in the holy. Nesech sheicher l'Hashem, a libation of intoxicating drink to Hashem. So it was it had to be done in the kodesh, and that's the libation itself. But the Gemara understands that if the libation was done in the holy, also the burning has to be done. And that's what the Brisa concludes. And it says, Kashem sheni suchai b'kedusha, the same way that, and this is on page 49b, we just turned the page, 49b, that the same way the nisuch, the libation was b'kedusha, the pouring was done in a holy place, which is basically the mizbeach, which is part of, in the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash, is where the altar was, the mizbeach, the altar, and the same way the libation was there in kedusha, in a holy place. Kachsrei fasoi, b'kedusha, also the burning would have to be done in a holy place. Now, it's not clear what the source is that it has to be burned there in such a holy place, but it was. Now, how do we know that the burning, in other words, the nisuch, nesech b'kodesh haseich, pour it in kodesh, nesech sheicher l'Hashem, that that it's a that the nesech is is a sheicher, is a intoxicating drink for Hashem. So who says? Where do you see that? Where do you see the burning there? The Gemara says, "My mashma." How do you see it? So the Gemara says, in other words, it's talking about the pouring. It doesn't say anything about the burning. So this is the Gemara's question. My mashma. Where do you see about the burning? It's talking about pouring. So this, the Gemara answers, Amar Ravina, Asya Kodesh Kodesh. So to answer this question, the Gemara says, Ravina says, it's because it's a Gzera Shavah. Ksiv Hacha, here it says, by the nisuch, by the pouring, by the libation, it says, by Kodesh Haseich, you should pour it in Kodesh, a Nesach, a libation. Ksiv Hasam, and it says over there, by karbanos that were left over, it says, V'sarafta es hanoisar ba'ish. When you leave over the meat and it wasn't eaten or burned on the altar, you have to burn it in the fire. Lo yeyachal, it's not allowed to be eaten. Noisar is a prohibition of meats when they're of the sacrifices that were left over. It's called noisar. And it says it has to be burned. Lo yeyachal, it's not allowed to be eaten. Ki kodesh, because it is kodesh. So there also, it uses the term kodesh. So here it says kodesh, and there it says kodesh, and there it says burning. So here also we learn that the burning of the of these leftover of the whatever's left from the wine, it has to be burned in kodesh. So that's basically the limud here, the expounding of this idea that it had to be burned in Kodesh is based on this Gzeira Shava, based on this word that it says in both places. It teaches us that it has to be burned in a holy place, and it can't be, you can't just take it out. Now, why did they take it out from this area to burn? It doesn't say that it doesn't say really that if you're going to burn it, you got to burn it in a holy place. But who says, it has to be taken out and burned? And the thing is, it doesn't really say it has to be taken out. Just it would get filled up. The area that this would go to would somehow would get filled up, and therefore it would need to be when you're going to burn it, you got to burn it in a holy place. To me, it is a little surprising the amount of libations. I would think, well, I guess it's not so. There was a lot of libations that were poured every sacrifice. 3 lug. I mean, not every carbon had, but many carbonis had libations. And all those carbonis that had libations, seemingly it would fill up this thing much faster than 70 years. That's to me a little surprising. I'm not exactly sure how to explain that, how it would last. If they had 1 libation a day and it would evaporate some of it and so on, I could understand a little. But here we're talking about every sacrifice. Okay, fine. Certain ones didn't have, but others, the many sacrifices had they had libations that would be. I think there was a Rashi before that mentioned that certain carbonos didn't have the libations. I think Rashi mentioned 2, Chatos and Osham, and I think there's also Pesach, Meiser, and Bechor, Meiser, Pesach. I think those were the 5 carbonos that don't have Nesachim, but all the other carbonos have Nesachim, and it's surprising. To me, it's a little surprising that it wouldn't fill up. I'm not exactly sure how that would work. I mean, David told us that.
Fill up.
What do I mean? Fill up? They would
Yeah.
pour the libations in the mizbeach. It would go
Right.
down to this little gap that was in
It
between.
gets to the ground, and then
get to the ground. It would somehow flow into this gap, and it would fill up the gap until it got all the way to the top of the ramp. So there was a gap by the ramp. In other words, the ramp was pushed right up to the mizbeach.
right.
So you had 4 walls surrounding whatever wine libations were pouring into this. There was 4 walls that held. In other words, it was a container for
So
all
it
the
wasn't
libations.
pipe from the top of the mizbeach.
There was a pipe that went all the way down.
It was an open drain till it got to the ground.
Till it got to the ground, or till it got to the middle area, and somehow there was a gap in between the mizbeach and the ramp, and the stuff would pour into that gap. So I would think it would fill up in I don't know, a month. It would fill up, not 70 years.
And it didn't go down anywhere. There was no.
It didn't go down. It was marble on the floor. According to this opinion, there was no hole. Now, David mentioned that there's an understanding from the Goinim that it was 600 cubits. Now, that I understand at least. But Rashi says over here that it was that it stopped at the marble floor, that it didn't go down any more than the marble. As Rashi says that Karki Isay shall ritzbas shayesh vein hayayin nivlasham. The wine wouldn't get absorbed, and all the nesachim of the wine of the whole year would go there. Now, it is interesting that he writes there all the wine of the whole year, and he doesn't write of the 70 years. The Gemara says 70 years, but Rashi says the word and all the wine of the whole year would go there. So maybe there's some other girsa. I have to take a look and see why Rashi said. Yes.
That gap, does that gap go beyond the floor of the Beit HaMikdash? In other words,
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah,
right.
It sounds like it didn't. According to Rashi, it sounds like it stopped right there.
Is it possible? Well, because that's not only for the wine, but it's also for the blood, right?
Oh, so that's another shisin, and it doesn't tell us about the blood going into that area. It doesn't say that here. But you're right, that was also called shisin, and there was an area below the yesoid that the bloods would go. And so that doesn't say that that was connected here. Here it implies
With
like we're only dealing with the wine part. So that maybe
blood,
was a different.
there
I'm
were no
sorry.
nesachim with blood. You're talking just about the spraying on the mizbeach.
No, what Ezra's mentioning is that the term shisin is plural. And one of the problems, one of the questions that's asked over here is why is it plural? According to Rashi, uh, seemingly there was one pipe that went down on the Mizbeach. The wine fell into that pipe. The water went into that pipe, and that pipe went all the way down. And where is the shisin plural? There's one pipe. So the commentaries mention, yeah, that there's also another pipe that went in the Yesoid, which was the base of the Mizbeach, around the Mizbeach on the side. That wine was that blood was poured there, as like Yesoid. It's mentioned in the Karbonis that we read in davening that the Shiare Hadam HaYeshevech HaYesoid HaMizbeach, it was poured on the base. That means after they did the sprinkling of the blood, they would
And
pour.
after they did the mixing, as they're doing the mixing to keep it from congealing, and then
So
they're
that
also spritzing it.
after they spritz, they would pour some.
But
And what
was
you're
left,
mentioning about the so the congealing had to do a little more with Yom Kippur, that they were nervous if they would pour
whatever, right? No,
par
but
and the
when they're
soyer.
walking it, whenever they're walking the blood, that had to be mixed.
Okay, that had to be anyway. So bottom line is they would pour into another shisin on the yasoid. That yasoid on the base, that was a different shisin, a different pipe that the blood would go to, and therefore it's called plural shisin. There were pipes. It wasn't just one pipe. But that and that it doesn't tell us here if there were different opinions as to where those pipes went to. But here we're talking about the libation pipes, and I guess because here we're dealing with the sukkahs, we're dealing with the nisuch hamayim. It doesn't really tell us about the other pipes. But anyway, that would be why it's called shisin plural, because there was another pipe that also went down to the went down into below the yasoid, wherever it went to. Again, it's a little unclear here where that pipe went to.
Here's
But,
two more. Here's two more notes.
Oh,
It says by shisin. It says there were two small narrow openings in the southwest corner of the mizbeach. These were the drain pipes through which the blood and other liquids would drain. The blood descended until it reached a water canal that flowed into the Kidron Valley. This is according to Rambam Sefer Avodah, Hilchos Beis Bechira. And the second note says, Lul Katan, the small gap, adjacent to the south. This is also from Rambam, the same Hilchos Beis Bechira, chapter 2, number 11, number 12. Adjacent to the southwest corner of the altar, there was a space of 1 square cubit covered by a marble tablet with a ring affixed to it. Every so often, the young Kohanim would descend through that space to gain access to the drain pipes and clean them.
So read that second thing one more time.
Every so often, the young Kohanim would descend through that space.
The sentence before that. The sentence before that.
Adjacent to the southwest corner of the Mizbeach, there was a space. This is the gap.
Okay.
There's a space of 1 square cubit covered by a marble tablet with a ring affixed to it. I guess maybe they should be able to pull it up.
Was this on the ramp or was this in the floor?
It says adjacent. It says adjacent to the southwest corner of the Mizbeach.
Yeah, would that mean like the ramp adjacent to it? I guess that's what it would mean. Or it's on the Mizbeach itself, you think it means? Isaac, we can't hear you. You're muted. Isaac, you're muted. I'm sorry, Ezra. What did you say?
It's on the floor next to the Mizbeach.
As part of the mizbeach, or
No, on the floor next
on the
to
floor?
Mizbeach.
On the floor next to the mizbeach.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
That's what
square armor that was right next to the Mizbeach by
mizbeach
the
on the
corner.
floor. Uh-huh.
And that's where they went
Well-
down when they could, and they cleaned.
So that's what they're understanding, that's what it means. The lul was on the floor, and that was what we're talking about, and that's the blood. What is your note talking about? The blood, or it's talking about what we are talking about, the wine?
It says the lul cut. It says by the words of lul katan.
Mm-hmm.
The
Right.
lul katan, the small gap adjacent to the southwest corner of the mizbeach. There was a space of 1 square cubit covered by a marble tablet with a ring affixed to it.
Right.
Every so often, the young Kohanim would descend through that space to gain access to the drain pipes and clean them. And the note before that, by it says the shisin, there were 2 small narrow openings in the southwest corner of the mizbeach, the same space, the southwest corner, and these were the drain pipes through which the blood and the other liquids would drain. The blood descended until it reached a water canal that flowed into the Kidron Valley.
No, that I saw, that I heard. But but that note you're talking about on the top of the mizbeach, it sounds like the holes on the top of the mizbeach, what you just read this second. Is that right? Is that on the top of the mizbeach, or that also on the floor?
It doesn't
next
say.
to them.
Jason.
So what I think what
about,
you're
yeah,
sorry,
Rabbi, think about what you're talking about here. You're talking about a one cubit square, which is basically 18 inches by 18 inches, 18 to 24 inches. So we're talking about the children of the Kohanim were the ones who would go down there in order to
clean it out. Right. So this is the thing. The Gemara, that the way we're learning it is a different opinion than what you're reading, David. What you're reading seems to fit with another commentary, because I see they bring here also a Tosfos, and Meila also learns a little differently, that there was something on the floor of the mizbeach, of the floor near the mizbeach, that had that there was a lul, a hole there. But the way we're learning our Gemara, the way Rashi learns, in the wording in our Gemara does seem to fit much more with Rashi, because our Gemara says that there was this gap between the kevesh and the mizbeach in the ma'aravai of the kevesh. Okay, I guess you could learn your way. I guess it's not 100% proof, but the way Rashi's learning is that it was in between, the gap was in between the kevesh, the ramp, and the mizbeach, and it was on the west side of the kevesh of the ramp versus the east side of the ramp. That the east side of the ramp was 16 cubits. The east side did not have this same gap. The left part of the kevesh of the ramp had this gap, and it was part of the ramp. The gap was in the ramp, not in the floor of the mizbeach. It was in the ramp of the mizbeach. That's the way Rashi seems to be learning.
Well, here in the Gemara, it says the small gap was between the ramp and the mizbeach.
And what would that mean? That the ramp had like a little part carved out of the ramp on the west side.
Yeah, well, it was between. It sounds like it was between. There was the ramp, and there's mizbeach west of the ramp, and there was a gap in between.
Right. So, for example, if you have the ramp, and you have the ramp is being going right up to the mizbeach. So you have the mizbeach here. You have some square mizbeach here, and you have a ramp, a slanted ramp that's going from the ground to the thing. So part of it had a gap. So that means, like, imagine you sort of like made it like a little like this. So the ramp, part of it went straight up, and part of it hit the mizbeach, and part of it there was a little gap in between the ramp and the mizbeach, a little gap there. So only on one side of the ramp. I'm sorry for my bad
That was
prop over here. But basically, it seems like the ramp has a gap. And if you want, we could do it and read it in Rashi, but that's the way Rashi seems to understand it. Rashi over here, Ben Kevesh Lamizbeach, which is on page 49a, about 20, maybe 25 lines from the bottom. He says, Ben Kevesh Lamizbeach, that Rashi, take a look. It says, HaKevesh Arkoi Lamed Beis, the Kevesh was 32 amos long, and umashapea va'oila, and it would be diagonal and go up in a diagonal way until va'oila tes amos, and it would go up 9 amos until it was even with the mizbeach, with the altar. The top edge of it did not reach; it wasn't attached to the mizbeach, but rather there was a ela avir ma'at. There was a slight space, beat mafsik bein tayim, separating, and it has to do, and I'm going to skip 2 lines, it has to do with the fact that they needed to throw, it had to be thrown, the meat that was burned had to be thrown, and therefore they understood that it has to be a little gap between the kevesh, the ramp, and the mizbeach. And that avir, v'oisei avir, koroi ben kevesh la mizbeach, that ear space, which seems to be like a little hair breadth, that's called between the kevesh, between the ramp and the mizbeach, means it didn't go exactly right up to it. It was a slight little break there. Now, that's in general. However, velul haya ba'oisay avir, the gap was part of that space on the west side, and the 8 amos on the west side of the kevesh, that there it was a bigger gap. That means the whole ramp was pretty close to the mizbeach. It had a little gap, but it was pretty close. On the west side of it, it had a bigger gap. It was on the 8 amos, the 8 cubits of the west side of the altar of the ramp, meaning there was an east side of the ramp and a west side of the ramp. The east side of the ramp had a very tiny gap. The west side had a bigger gap. Because the width of the ramp was 16 cubits. Again, the length of it was 32 cubits, and it went all the way up to be flush with the mizbeach, but it was right up to the mizbeach with a little gap. Now, the width of the kevesh of the ramp was 16 amos. That means there was 8 on the east side and 8 on the west, 16 divided in 2. Mizrach lamara, from the east to the west. That gap that the libations would pour into, it was done on the southwestern side of the altar. And this gap was blocked on all 4 sides until the ground. The karkiisa shall ritzbas shayish, and the ground was the earth, was the floor of marble. Ve'ein hayayin nivlasham, and the wine would not be absorbed there. V'chol niske yayin shall kol hashana yardin shan, and all the wine of the whole year would fall into that gap. This opinion does not hold that there were any shisin, that there were these pipes that went down until the Tehom. The less lay that he doesn't hold of it. Upalig adrabanan, and he argues on the rabbis. So this opinion seems to follow this that understanding that there was a gap in the actual ramp, and that's the way we're learning over here. Now, they do bring here a Tosfos, and you mentioned, David, that there's a Rambam that seems to understand a little differently, that it's there's a gap on the floor of the where the mizbeach is standing, on the floor next to the mizbeach, and also next to the ramp, but it's on the floor. That's where there was a hole, and it was an amma by an amma, and that's where the gap was. But this understanding of Rashi seems to be learning it more literally, in between the kevesh the ramp and the altar means literally in between the kevesh and the altar, not on the diagonal. If you take you look at the ramp and you look at the side of the altar and you say, well, there's a gap, there's a space in between the kevesh and the altar. Here we're saying literally the kevesh goes right up to the altar, but there's a gap in between the two things. So that's the way Rashi seems to be learning, that it's very literal. And anyway, this is where the libations would flow, and then ultimately they would be burned because the children of the Kayanim, meaning the little ones, were able to clean it out. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to get in over there. But they were able either themselves to get in, or they were able to stick things with their hands in there and clean it out. And ultimately,
Rabbi, I think you're talking about aren't we talking about two different things? I mean, the space between the ramp and the altar itself, we said, was more like a tower, which meant that it was bigger at the bottom than it was at the top. And that's the reason why there is a gap between the kevesh and the altar.
No, that's not the reason why. That's not the reason why there was a gap. There was a different reason why there was a gap. It could have gone all the way up, but there was a different reason. It had to do with the fact that everything had to be thrown onto the altar, and therefore it meant that it had to go over an empty space. The understanding was it had to go over the ground. So if it had to go over, it had to be thrown, it had to go over an empty space. So that meant that there had to be a slight gap. But here on the left side of the ramp, they made a bigger gap, and that had to do with the libations to be a hold for the libations. This was where the container where they were contained.
That explains why I think the Kohanim had to walk on one side of the ramp,
right,
and go around. Otherwise, they would have to walk over this bigger space.
Take a big step. Okay, but right, you're not supposed to take a big step. Right.
Okay.
Right. Correct.
You got to do it coming down.
It would seem like
come up and walk around in this bayach, and then you come down the ramp.
But the question is,
the same side. You're coming down on the same side. You're not coming down on the other side of the ramp. See, if you read what it said he went up on one side, he made a turn, and then went all the way around the altar, and then came down the same side that he went up. Otherwise, he'd have to walk over that opening.
That gap. Now, it doesn't. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that even according to Rashi, that area in which you had fluid and things like that in there, that stuff would stay there. It wouldn't drain, according to Rashi.
Right. Correct.
Which meant that at some point somebody
had to clean it
out, or something had to be done in order to remove the fluid. Now, what did they do? I don't think that space was big enough for a young Kohen to go down there and clean. In fact, if anything, the maximum height of the fluid in there was the 9 cubits, which was the height of the kibush.
Yeah.
So So how does it get cleaned?
So it seems like they used utensils. They must have had some type of utensils, but they needed someone to be able to at least fit their hand there and maneuver. I guess it was easier for the kids. Now the question is how thick it was. It doesn't really say here the thickness of it. It does say it was a little katan. It was small. So what?
A square amma, you said.
That's what David mentioned, according to the other opinion. Here it doesn't say that.
Side, but that's on the other side of the Mizbeach.
According to Rambam.
He mentions, he mentions, and that's on the floor. Again,
and that one was the pipes that went all the way down.
Say that again.
And that was, when you remove the piece of the shayish, that was the one that went all the way down, according to one opinion, went down to 60 cubits,
600 cubits. Right. If that's the understanding, if you connect those two opinions, yeah.
So if that was only blood and blood had congealed, even somebody would have to go in there all the time and clean it. Otherwise, you get a backup. So the other question I had is, when you're doing the actual shechita and everything else, and there's blood all over the place, where is the blood going to?
So those bloods, there was a washing that they would do in the I don't know if you know how it's done in Israel. They sort of pour water. The way they mop the floor in Israel is they pour a lot of water on the floor, and then they pull out a blocker that's in the wall, and they push the water, and it goes spritzing out of the house down onto the sidewalk. That's the way it's done in Israel. So that was the way it was done in the Beis Hamikdash as well. They would block the hole and block it up and fill it with water, and then it would all wash out. Then they would pull away the blocker, and all the water mixed with blood, and all of that would just come out, and they would wash the entire Beis Hamikdash. That was the way it was done. Again, this is what I'm explaining to you is not the blood that was sprinkled. This is just the blood, the schmutz that was the blood from the
In the shechita areas, if you look at pictures they have Beis Hamikdash, there were shechita areas
right
on the side with the hooks and everything to hang.
The northern, at least the kachim kachim had to be slaughtered in the northern section, but I guess the whole Beis Hamikdash had from other korbanos as well. Anyway, but they would fill up the floor with water, and it would then pour out.
Okay, but where would it go? Where would it go? You're saying
probably this Nachal Kidron, which is that valley that's right below the Iyar David. If you go there, you see this valley. It's right around right around the Beis Hamikdash.
But Iyar David, no.
That's part of the valley. I'm just saying that's the same valley that when you go to Iyar David, you actually see the valley very clearly.
Okay. All right. So there should be remnants. Once you do the excavations, you should see the remnants of blood on the walls.
Maybe, yeah, maybe, I don't know. I'm not sure. You'd have to find from people, archaeologists. You have to speak to them how that works. Yeah, but yeah, okay. So so this is the brisa of. Oh boy, my time is up. Okay.
Somebody will run around selling little hardened pieces of shecher that he had from under the Beis Hamikdash.
All right, we're going to stop here. Have a wonderful Shabbos, everyone. Sei gesund. We're on page 49b. Okay, well, we'll have to start.
Sei gesund.
Yasher Koyach.
Rabbi.
Okay,
Good
sure.
Shabbos, everybody.
Okay, have a wonderful Shabbos.